It's Carnival Friday. Welcome, first time listeners. You're listening to Lana the Educator. Be sure to check out seasons 1 to 4 to learn what we are all about here. And if you're interested in all of this, then like and subscribe. Today, we're going to take a look at Carnival's ABCs, all about Carnival. Let's start with Carnival Friday. Carnival Friday in Trinidad is a vibrant lead up to the grand carnival celebrations on Monday and Tuesday, and that is today. So, today is going to be packed with high energy events, performances, and parties. And some of these major highlights would have been Fantastic Friday, which was changed to the, or otherwise known as, the International Soca Monarch Finals. There was a hiatus in the last 3 years or so, but it is one of the most anticipated events, competition that is usually held on Carnival Friday night. So there are top soca artists who compete usually in two categories, the power soca and the groovy soca categories. And you can look at past performances online right here on YouTube. And the winner usually earn the title of Soca Monarch and significant bragging rights for the carnival season. You also have so many last lap fetes. We say fete in Trinidad, um, from that French word, and Carnival Friday is one of the biggest party nights of the season with numerous all-inclusives and cooler fetes happening across the country. And popular events include Silent Morning, Soca Brainwash, Rise and Shine Breakfast Party. And you can check all of these out on Island E-Tickets. If you look at the calendar of events, you will see so many more um, fetes happening today on Fantastic Friday. Then you also have schools. Schools get involved in carnival. I mean, it's part of our culture. So you have many school competitions or many carnival activities taking place in schools throughout this entire week, indeed, but particularly this Friday today, where you would find also on a larger scale some of the final rungs of the Junior Calypso Monarch, as well as Junior Panorama and the Junior King and Queen of Carnival take place uh, today as well. Next, you have Calypso and Chutney competition showcasing our culture here. You have the Calypso Monarch semi-finals and the Chutney Soca Monarch finals, often happening on or around Carnival Friday. And these competitions showcase the best in lyrical storytelling and rhythmic fusions of Trinidad's diverse culture. Of course, there's going to be a lot of activity and movement out there, a lot of traffic too as well, because you have Juve prep and last minute costume pickups. So with the Juve happening early Monday morning, many of the masqueraders will spend Friday getting their last minute supplies or customizing their outfits and finalizing their plans. You also have the mass cams being really busy as people collect their costumes for the road parade. Then you also have downtown and Soca street parties taking place, getting people in gear for the weekend of Carnival and gearing up for Carnival Monday and Tuesday. So the streets, especially in Port of Spain, are buzzing with the live music and DJs and street parties, which you will see from on Frederick Street in the square and heading, just west Port of Spain. Then you have all the last lap vibes that start setting in as people soak up, the final pre-carnival moments. So let's talk a bit about what some of these things mean. You want to look at some terms here, well, particularly carnival, which I think most people are familiar with in some form or the other, if it is not Trinidad Carnival, but most countries in the region, the Caribbean region here, will have carnival. There are carnivals in Brazil as well, and other places in North America and South America, Latin America as well. And then we want to look at some terms in terms of what is soca. Well, let me clarify for you, for those first-time listeners who might not be familiar with soca. I think it's very rare now, especially if you're listening to this podcast, that you would not know what soca is, but I'm still going to edify people for the first time listeners. So, soca music is a genre of music that originated in Trinidad and Tobago in the 1970s, and it's really a modern take on calypso that combines African, Caribbean, and Indian rhythms, and it is often used for dancing at carnival. It originated really with Garfield Blackman, otherwise known as Lord Shorty, who coined the term soca in the 1970s. And he created that to really revive calypso, which was becoming less popular with the younger generations. And we can see in 2025 it has been successful because you heard me mention the many calypso competitions that are taking place. Soca also can incorporate elements of funk, soul, disco, and zouk. So it's a very versatile genre of music. And many of our, of course, well-known soca artists come from Trinidad and Tobago: Marshall Montano, Bunji Garlin, Patrice Roberts, Destra Garcia, uh, Nyla Blackman, of course, the granddaughter of Garfield Blackman. And soca is what you would hear when you go to our fetes, which is what I'm going to define next for you, because it is often used for dancing at carnival and at these fetes. And it really emphasizes its rhythmic energy and, the studio production. And you may have encountered it in some Bollywood films or in some Bhangra and Punjabi pop because it has been experimented in those genres as well. So let's look now at fete. you know, uh, the standard definition would have been, a public function, including entertainment and the sale of goods and refreshments. And it still is that. But in the Caribbean, in Trinidad and Tobago and other English-speaking Caribbean territories, fetes are huge parties held during carnival season, you know. And it's really a festive celebration of entertainment. It's our greatest fete season is, of course, Carnival, and it can last several days, as you will see here. And then it has evolved. Fetes have evolved into just these series of organized parties that are held by usually promoters and are usually build up to our one big celebration, which is Carnival. So there you have some terminology that might help you better understand what was taking place here. Of course, largely included in that is panorama, pan being our national instrument, one of the latest instrument to be developed in the 21st century here. And then the other that you might want to have me define is juve. So, we say Juve. We might have different pronunciations, and of course, the French speaking islands and French would, be better at pronouncing this. But it is really the official start of Carnival for us. It is at dawn on the Monday preceding Lent because our Carnival ends on Carnival Tuesday, and then we go straight into Ash Wednesday. But it is our traditional carnival celebration in many countries, and it is really a word that originates, as you can hear the sound, from the French word, which means daybreak or morning, and as it says, it signals the start of Carnival. So it's a very exciting time for people. And this leads us into many of the traditional carnival celebrations in many countries. And of course, the foundation is here in Trinidad and Tobago with where we combine, just the roots that are steeped in French Afro-Creole traditions, such as canboulay, which you would see the reenactment of if you visit Trinidad for Carnival. We throw paint during this time because um, it is really a throwback to when the enslaved Africans were prohibited from participating in the lavish masquerade balls thrown by European colonizers. So they created their own festivities using drumming, dance, and symbolic expressions like covering themselves in paint and oil. So let's talk about some of the traditional characters you would see in Juve. This now takes us into our Monday and Tuesday. Carnival Monday and Tuesday in Trinidad are the peak days of our island's World famous Trinidad and Tobago Carnival, which is our vibrant festival that is filled with music, dance, and revelry. And here's what's happened. On Carnival Monday, we're going to have Juvie that you heard me mention. That's an early morning celebration. It usually starts at 4 a.m. to sunrise. Participants are covered in mud, paint, oil, or cocoa. I haven't seen cocoa in a while. Chocolate now, in that case. They dance through the streets behind the music trucks, which will play pan, soca, or calypso. And of course, the deep roots of Juve take place in our history, which reflects our resistance to colonial rule and the traditions of the freed African slaves. So you would see many of the traditional carnival characters. And for many school-age children out there listening, you may have been asked to do a carnival project where you had to research or portray one of the following characters. So the students or children would have started off their celebrations and their portrayals way before the adults have done, because they would have started during this week, even today, Friday, and then Saturday and Sunday being their own form of mass. So we have characters first up like the baby doll. The baby doll, this character is really meant to be a parody of a mother who has a bastard child. And it was portrayed mainly in the 1930s, but it is still seen every year at old mass competitions, because we have traditional mass and old mass. We have pretty mass, as we may say. And the main components of this costume that you're seeing are really the pleated dress and the statement bonnet that stands out, and most importantly, the doll. Right? So you have masqueraders walking up to men on the streets and accusing them of being the father of the child. And usually the masquerader will continue to embarrass this man until he gives them some money. Although the costume is mostly portrayed by women, men will sometimes combine this costume with a high-pitched voice for comedic effect. So, they go out decked in this frill dress and bonnet, carrying this doll, which, symbolizes the illegitimate baby. Then you have next up the bats. The bat. The bat costume is normally black or brown and fitted tightly over the masquerader's body. The headpiece covers the head entirely, with the player being able to see through the mouth or lifting it up to his forehead. It is made of swan's down with papier-mâché face, teeth, nose, and eyes. And then they wear leather shoes with metal claws for toes that are normally used. And ordinary shoes can also be adapted by attaching like long socks or metal claws for a second sole. The bat feature that stands out are the wings that are made from wire and bamboo or even cane, wire bending being a great skill here for persons in Trinidad, and during the carnival season, much sought after. And the bat wings are covered with the same cloth as the skin fitting the costume, and they can extend to 12 or 15 feet. And the masquerader's arms are usually fastened to these wings, where they wear matching gloves complete with the costume. And then there's a bat dance to go with the costume. So check it out on Monday. I'm showing this still here, but you can go and see the bat in motion. During the performance, you will have the masquerader dressed as the bat crawling and flapping and dancing on their toes and folding the wings in some movements that imitate those of a bat, which is called the bat dance. Bookman is one that I haven't heard of portrayed in a long time. Is also referred to as gongman or ruler, and is a feature of a devil mask portrayal. And the other two groups of characters in the devil band are usually the imps and the beasts. So the bookman's costume usually consists of a Tudor style pant or a richly embroidered gown made of velvet and satin. To be fair, I'd always seen this character, but had not known what it was. I just thought it represented some colonial figure or something like that. But on the bookman's head is an oversized head mask which contains small horns and carries a demonic expression. The masquerader usually wears a flowing cape with biblical scenes festooned on it. And the face of this mask is supposed to mirror the face of the devil himself. And the bookman usually carries a pen and a large book in which he writes the names of the prospective souls for the devil. The bookman is really the principal character in the Devil Band, and in keeping with his status, his movements is waltz-like with constant bowing. And the musical accompaniment is provided by an orchestra or trumpet or saxophone, bass, and drums playing conventional tunes. I'm making a total supposition here. This is probably why we don't see him so much anymore, because we don't really have the brass so much now in the carnival that we used to have. Next up in our carnival ABCs is the Borokeet. The Borokeet sounds like parakeet that we have here. And this is derived from the Spanish word boroquito, meaning little donkey. And it is constructed from bamboo, so to give the illusion of a dancer riding a small burro or donkey. So it is made out of papier mâché, and the rider will wear a large sombrero and clothes with multiple embellishments, especially flowers. And the Burkheat also has some origin in East Indian descent and has a female variation. Let's learn something new today called the Sumari, right? And what happens there, it is where the masquerader enters through a hole at the back of the donkey's neck and carries the reins in his hand, creating that illusion that, that he is this rider. And there is, of course, the bit and the bridle, which is made out of colored cord. And the rider wears a satin skirt and a large matador straw hat and dances in a way that mimics this riding of the donkey. We also have in our carnival ABCs, we have the clowns, right? The clowns are dressed as we would typically see in clowns, baggy clothing with their big red noses, wild, colorful hair, big shoes, and sometimes a white face. The band leader of the costume group would wear a crown to show that he is the king clown. And you sometimes have older costumes that would have an exaggerated paper mask instead of face paint. One of the characters we haven't seen in a long time is the cattle, the cow as well, but the cattle, the cow is this original carnival character costume that was made out of rice bags and covered in leaves of the plantain tree. So if you see this out there, this is what you'll be looking at. I have seen it in the University of the West Indies Festival Arts Center Carnival student production. This was the first time that I recall seeing the cow mask or the cattle mask. Now most costumes consist of cream-colored loose skirts with tight pants, and they have gold accents. The full papier-mâché mask was also replaced by a hat or headband with cow horns. And since this is a costume that is meant to be done in a group, you have matadors and picadors who can also join the group and challenge the cows. So other members of the group would dress up as a mad bull and charge at the matadors or picadors and the bystanders as well, which creates, this fun environment. And the mad bull of the group would stop charging at certain bystanders if they had money to a member of the group. So a really nice place to see this is the Oliad, as I said, in the Department for Festival and Creative Arts, if it's still called that, and the University of the West Indies here in Trinidad, St. Augustine. Next character, and I know a crowd pleaser, is the Dame Lorraine. This was imitative of mass played by the 18th and 19th century French planters. It's a very performative mask. This masquerader would dress up in elegant costumes of the French aristocracy and parade in groups at private homes or particularly on Carnival Sunday night. So they performed very sophisticated dances of the period. What happened was the character originally came about as a parodied version of a rich planter's wife, the typical costume consisting of the exaggerated breasts and backside, which were made by stuffing pillows or other fillers into the dress or undergarments of the costume. And over the years, the costume shifted from being worn comedically by mostly men to being worn almost exclusively by women. Next up, another crowd pleaser, the devils, who form part of the Jab mask. So there are multiple variations of the devil or devil-like creatures in Carnival and in Carnival costumes. In modern day, the devil costumes all look pretty similar, but there was once a time when every devil costume was very distinct. The most traditional one is one that I mentioned before, which was the Bookman. And this character is known for his giant people mask, as I said, and the book and pencil that he carries, but very much linked to the sort of double devil mask is the jab jab. And oh, outdone, the jab jab mask is outdone Trinidad by the Grenadians. They've really perfected it. And the name of this is really derived from the French patois for diable diable. It is have like the jabs having sometimes a thick whip of plaited hem, which they swing and crack threateningly, and these whips can reduce the costumes of other jabs to threads, right? And we usually say jambalasi, jambalasi. Right. So you have that devil mask, and accompanying all of these close behind would be the blue devils that we have, with the oil and paint and the fire breathing and all of that. You do have those. Next up, we have the dragon. Um, Here and there you see, sometimes many years you see, lots of costumes out there with dragons, and other years it's pretty scarce. Um, Many of the dragon characters are categorized with the devil. The most common exception is the red dragon, which is also the very old traditional carnival character. The dragon character is also referred to as the king beast if the dragon is part of the devil band. He cannot cross through water, especially not holy water. So a key man is vital to the companion of the dragon. Next, we have the Indians. And you would see it, with the exaggerated headdress. We are in modern day. Some might not say it is politically correct, but it is part of our tradition and culture. And the Indian character here, not because we're in Trinidad and Tobago, be mistaken to of the East Indians, more of the native Indians, indigenous people of North America is what we kind of portray. And it is one of the most common costume depictions in Carnival because of its versatility in terms of the design, the price, the band size. The American Indian characters in Carnival, they pay tribute to, the maroon communities that formed during slavery and to the African indigenous marriages in North America under Spanish colonial rule. So during slavery, the enslaved Africans escaped and established these maroon settlements, and some of the communities mixed with the local indigenous population. So you would find two Indian mask characters are the fancy Indians and the wild Indians, and both of these are based on depictions of Native Americans in popular culture and Hollywood. And there are multiple variations of it. You have the Indian chief with his elaborate headdress that's really very heavy. And you have the fancy Indians, which you would find the masqueraders having this costume with the main purpose really being to be aesthetically pleasing. And some Indian bands may focus more on one color like blue or red. And they really are a moving tribute to the indigenous people, and they incorporate the masking tradition sometimes from New Orleans. You also have the wild Indians or the red Indians. This specific costume is based on a Venezuelan tribe called the Waro. Waro. Correct me if I'm wrong in the pronunciation. Of course, I believe I got it incorrect. And this is one of the oldest instances of the Indian costume in Carnival, the Red Indians. You have the Black Indian, similar to simple Indian costume, except that the face is painted black. And of course, you have all of this forms the fancy Indians. right? And the masquerader really determines how expensive they want the costume to be. The headpiece is the standout piece here, but in its simplest form, it's just one with feathers sticking up, more feathers making tails down the back, as you can see. And the more elaborate headpieces are built over bamboo or wire frames, right? And the masquerader has this wigwam, which is like a richly worked ostrich plume with mirrors and beads, featherwork, totem poles, canoes, and ribbons of all of that. And it is one of the most popular variety of Indian mask, the fancy Indian. One of my favorites is the Midnight Robber. Such a captivating and mysterious character. And of course, one of the most popular characters in Trinidad Carnival. Very braggadocious. He has this rubber voice, a knack for vivid storytelling. So you can see why it's one of my favorites. And he mimics, they say, the West African storyteller, or the griot. And although his stories are mostly meant to show his bravery and valor, the Midnight Robber's speeches can really also be commentary or parody of current events. What the Midnight Robber really desires is to become king of the robbers by outtalking or outwitting all of his rivals. So his aspirations really come from a history of wrongdoing in his family, which is meant to mimic the emancipation and history that influenced the celebrations of Trinidad and Tobago Carnival. The Midnight Robber does not have one official story. So if you see them out there, each of them will be telling a different story most times. Of course, you will have similar tapestries of stories moving their way through them, but it's not um, mandatory that they tell the same story. So every masquerader or storyteller can give their own version of their history, right? And the costume is usually black pants and this enormous hat, a blouse, and a cape. And the black costume is usually decorated with skulls and tombstones, especially the cape. And the hat may sometimes have these decorative tassels or skulls hanging from the brim, you know. Um, and the Midnight Robber also carries a gun, of course, and a coffin in either hand. And the gun, fake gun, is used to scare the bystanders into placing money into the coffin. So the Midnight Robber sometimes might be part of a raiders band, but is mostly a soul figure, soul masquerader. And when the two robbers encounter each other at Carnival, they may duel, but the duel is not using the gun. The duel uses the words to prove who has the most villainous bravado. So it's one of the most beloved characters in Carnival and one of my favorite characters because it is so over the top and performative. And then the skill with the words is, really stands out for me. And the feature that lets you know that that midnight robber is coming is that whistle which he blows, and he punctuates it. He punctuates his tale with a valor with the whistle. Then you have the minstrels. After the terrifying midnight robber, you have this decorative depiction of a European minstrel, and they come as this group carrying instruments like a banjo or maracas or rattlers, and they are known for their pinstripes, their shirts, and the top hat. And a lot of the masqueraders choose to paint their face white as a parody of real, American minstrels that they would sometimes dress up as. And their costume looks like a scissor tail coat with striped trousers and this tall straw hat and glove. And they entertain the audiences with popular old American songs usually. And they come down the street accompanying themselves on the guitar and rattling bones played between their hands. And if you're in for a special treat, you might see them having a special dance routine. Another thrilling character is the Moko Jumbi. And that this is a derivation of the god Moko. You've seen these variations on bamboo stilts all over the Caribbean region. It comes straight out of West African tradition. Moko is a diviner in the Congo language. And the term Jambi or ghost was really added by the freed slaves. So it was believed that the height of the stilts was associated with the ability to foresee evil faster than ordinary men. The Mukojumbi you would see on these tall bamboo stills, flowing characters, was felt to be the protector of the village. And of course, this mask is well known, well popularized. You will see a Mokojumbi in every carnival event. It is an authentic African masquerade mounted on sticks, of 10 to 12 feet high. And the costumes, well, now they really, really vary. Brightly colored pants or skirt and the jacket and an elaborate hat. And the Mokojumbi masquerader would dance through the streets all day. They try to collect money from people on the upper floors of the balcony. So it's fun to see that happening there. And they do a dance, really, really skillful dance, similar to a jig. And they are usually in the past were accompanied by drum and flute and triangle, but now we have, soca trucks. So you will see them uh, accompanied by those. Another favorite, and you will know why, because it's the wordsmith, the Perro Grenade. And that is another parody of a character called Perrault. The Grenade at the end of his name is meant to show his connection to Grenada, which is what makes the character more specific to the Caribbean as opposed to the Perrault, who is also recognized by the French. His costume is those of rags and a white mask that may cover his entire face or maybe just the outer part of himself. Sometimes they have this little, very small, like a wand, and he really prides himself on his intelligence and his ability to spell any word. And it's spelling these words in creative ways. So he's very finely dressed, learned scholar, um, and usually spelling polysyllabic words and quoting passages from Shakespeare. So he was a feared fighter with the whip as well and the bull pistol, which he does carry. So he's not just an intellectual, he's also a fighter. And he's usually followed by a band of female supporters who fought on his behalf against the other Pero groups. His descendant, the Pero Grenade, is a satire on the richer and more respectable Pero. So he wears these rags. Now they are colorful, but they traditionally were what we call caucus bag or burlap. And he just stripped them, and he's covered in small tins containing pebbles with these small boxes that rattle and are attached. He can also wear a hat of a colored head tie on his head and maybe a grotesque mask sometimes, which provides that anonymity for someone who delights in making these barbed comments against respectable members of the community. You have these sailor bands, usually now accompanied by pan. So, on the S. And that was introduced into Carnival when the naval ships from America and France came into Trinidad in the 1880s. And similar to the Indian mask, it's noted for its versatility. The costume can be very costly. It's decorative. If it is historically accurate, as the masquerader wishes, it is very easy for groups to portray this kind of sailor costume since the characters are not specific or singular. And there are multiple variations of the sailor mask in the same way there are multiple variations of the Indian mask. So you have the King Sailor, who is the leader of the band, right? Um, he would usually have like a mask, a paper mache mask with this crooked nose, and that sometimes had warts on it. Um, it's not so much a common carnival costume anymore, but you will see the white sailor, which kind of resembles the Coast Guard. Um, you have the Free French sailor as well. So if you see a costume with a black beret with the name of the boat on the hat, that's usually the Free French. You have flower bag sailor, a cheaper, simpler version of the sailor costume. And the sailor there is sometimes called a bad behavior sailor for his drunken actions. Haven't seen this one in a while myself. You have the CBs and ships company. Again, bad behavior sailors. They would walk around and mimic a drunk, the movements of a drunk. And these characters were, as I said, introduced around the 1880s when the British, French, and American naval ships came to Trinidad. So that's some of our ABCs for Carnival. So let me know if you see these characters out there. You'd see them on Monday and Tuesday generally. Some of them more take to the Monday mass, especially coming out of Juvie. So that's Carnival Monday. What about Carnival Tuesday? This is the grand parade of the band. So it's all day from 8 a.m. to midnight. And this is the main event where the masqueraders wear their full costumes, feathered, bejeweled, brightly colored, and the bands cross the big stage at the Queen's Park Savannah in Port of Spain, and they compete for the title of Band of the Year. It's really an atmosphere of electric energy, the revelers dancing nonstop to the biggest soca hits of the season. And then you have competitions and crowning of champions that would have taken place in some prejudged competitions, like the king and queen of the bands, which is the most elaborate, larger than life costumes that are judged. If you go onto the Carnival Commission site, you will see, the competitions of many of these events. You also have, of course, the road march champion, which is derived from finding the most played soca song on the road, and that person is crowned, usually the soca artist, so the person singing the genre of music. And then you have Band of the Year, which is the best overall masquerade band, would win the top prize for top monetary prize, and of course, bragging rights. So Carnival Friday, exciting day for us. As the day wanes, the celebration continues until midnight on Tuesday, which would mark the official end of Carnival. And Ash Wednesday begins, which is supposed to bring a more solemn and reflective mood, but then there has become the tradition where there are cool downs and after Carnival and last lap parties taking place. So you've been listening to Lana the Educator. Remember, you empower minds and you ignite curiosity.